For most of history, half of humanity had to solve a problem that history books almost never talk about. Periods. Not wars. Not kings. Not empires. Not armies marching across continents. Periods. Every generation of women had to deal with them. Ancient women. Medieval women. Farmers. Queens. Mothers. Workers. Girls becoming adults. Women living in deserts, cities, villages, forests, temples, castles, and farms. And yet, if you open many history books, you will find hundreds of pages about roads, weapons, taxes, and battles, but almost nothing about this. So here is the question. Before pads, before tampons, before pharmacies, before plastic wrappers, before disposable products, what did women actually use? The answer is not one single invention. It was whatever the world gave them. Cloth, linen, wool, plant fibers, moss, sponges, rags, layers of clothing, and knowledge passed quietly from one generation of women to the next. Because menstruation was not invented by the modern world. It has been part of human life for as long as humans have existed. But the way societies treated it changed everything. In some places, menstruation was connected to fertility, cycles, and life. In others, it was treated as dangerous, dirty, mysterious, or even supernatural. And that difference mattered. Because the physical problem was only one part of the story. The bigger problem was often the meaning people attached to it. Let's start with the practical side. If you lived before modern period products, you needed something absorbent. That could mean folded cloth. It could mean linen. It could mean wool. It could mean soft plant material. It could mean anything that could absorb fluid, be held in place, washed, reused, or replaced. In ancient Egypt, some historians believe women may have used softened papyrus or linen. Papyrus was everywhere in Egypt, and linen was one of the most important fabrics in Egyptian life. But we have to be careful. Ancient people did not leave us a complete instruction manual for everyday menstrual care. Most of what we know comes from medical texts, scattered references, later interpretations, and educated guesses. That is part of the problem. The people who lived this experience every month were rarely the people writing the official record. Still, we know ancient societies did pay attention to women's reproductive health. Egyptian medical papyri discussed pregnancy, fertility, and gynecological problems. That does not mean they understood menstruation the way modern medicine does, but it does mean they were not ignoring the female body completely. And then came ancient Greece, a civilization famous for philosophy, mathematics, medicine, theater, and also some very strange ideas about women's bodies. Greek medical writers tried to explain menstruation through the theories they had. Some saw it as part of health. Others connected it to ideas about excess blood, heat, coldness, and balance. Aristotle, for example, treated menstrual blood as the female material used in generation. In his view, male semen supplied the active principle, while the female body supplied the material. Today, that sounds deeply wrong. But for centuries, ideas like that shaped how educated men talked about women's bodies. And that is one of the most important parts of this history. Many of the sources we have about menstruation were written by men who did not experience it. So sometimes those sources tell us less about what women actually did, and more about what men feared, misunderstood, or tried to explain. Rome gives us one of the most extreme examples. Pliny the Elder wrote about menstruation as if it had almost magical destructive powers. Ancient texts connected menstrual blood with damaged crops, spoiled wine, dulled metal, dying plants, and other bizarre effects. Obviously, Roman women were not walking natural disasters. They were living their lives. They were working, managing households, raising children, buying food, making cloth, moving through cities, and surviving like everyone else. But the writings around menstruation show how easily a normal biological process could become surrounded by fear. So what did women actually use? In the Mediterranean world, soft cloth, wool, linen, and possibly sea sponges were likely options depending on place, wealth, and access. A wealthy woman might have finer fabric. A poor woman might use rougher cloth. A woman near the sea might have access to natural sponge. A rural woman might rely on whatever could be washed and reused. Class mattered. Geography mattered. Privacy mattered. And so did shame. Because once menstruation was treated as something embarrassing or impure, the problem became much harder. It was not just, what can I use? It was also, where can I wash it? Where can I dry it? Who will see it? Will I be restricted? Will people think I am dirty? By the Middle Ages in Europe, Many people with periods likely used cloth rags as homemade pads. Linen was especially useful because it was absorbent and washable. Some evidence also suggests that absorbent moss could be used. But again, this was not a world of easy convenience. Washing cloth took labor. Drying cloth required privacy. Water access was not always simple. And most women could not stop working just because they were menstruating. A peasant woman still had fields, animals, food, children, laundry, firewood, and survival to think about. A period did not pause daily life. For wealthier women, there may have been more fabric, more privacy, and help from servants. For poorer women, there was improvisation. And that pattern repeats through history. The materials might change, but the basic truth stays the same. Women adapted. In China, traditional medicine treated menstruation as an important sign of health. Timing, color, flow, and pain could be interpreted as signs of balance or imbalance in the body. Women likely used cloth pads held in place by belts or clothing, depending on time period and class. In different indigenous cultures, menstruation could have very different meanings. In some communities, it was treated as a time of restriction. In others, it was connected to spiritual power, rest, or separation from normal duties. That is why we have to avoid one simple story. There was no single ancient way to understand menstruation. Some cultures feared it. Some respected it. Some medicalized it. Some controlled it. Some ignored it in writing while women kept solving it in practice. And then, much later, came the modern products. This part is shocking because it is so recent. Disposable menstrual pads are not ancient. They are barely over a century old in their modern commercial form. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, companies began developing commercial menstrual products. But selling them was difficult because menstruation was still surrounded by embarrassment. Women did not always want to walk into a store and ask a male pharmacist for a menstrual product. So even when products existed, shame slowed adoption. Then Kotex changed the market in the 1920s. The product grew out of absorbent silicotton, a material Kimberly-Clark had used for surgical bandages during World War I. Nurses discovered it could work as a menstrual pad, and after the war, Kotex became one of the first major disposable menstrual pad brands. That means for nearly all of human history, there were no modern pads. No adhesive strips. No plastic wrappers. No wings. No drugstore aisle. No brand choices. Just bodies, materials, culture, and survival. And this is where the story becomes bigger than products. Because the history of menstruation is not only about what women used. It is about what societies allowed them to say. If a society treated menstruation as dirty, then women had to hide it. If a society treated it as dangerous, women could be restricted. If a society treated it as sacred, women might be separated but also respected. If a society treated it as biology, women could manage it with less shame. The materials were often simple. The meanings were complicated. And because men wrote so much of the historical record, the practical knowledge of women was often left invisible. A Roman man could write a bizarre theory about menstrual blood-ruining crops. But the woman who knew exactly which cloth worked best, how to fold it, how to wash it, how to hide it, how to keep working, and how to teach her daughter, might never appear in the archive. That knowledge lived in kitchens, in washing places, in bedrooms, in fields, in whispered advice, in mothers, sisters, midwives, servants, and friends. It was practical knowledge. And it was history. So the answer to what did women use before pads and tampons is simple at first. Cloth, wool, linen, moss, sponges, plant fibers, and whatever was available. But the deeper answer is this. Women used intelligence. They used memory. They used community. They used trial and error. They used the materials around them. They used whatever allowed them to keep living. Because menstruation did not stop history. Women bled through the building of cities. Through the rise and fall of empires. Through migrations, wars, harvests, births, markets, plagues, and revolutions. Cleopatra dealt with it. Roman women dealt with it. Medieval peasants dealt with it. Women in ancient China dealt with it. Women whose names were never written down dealt with it. And maybe that is the strangest part. One of the most universal human experiences was also one of the most ignored. History remembered the weapons. It remembered the kings. It remembered the roads. But it almost forgot the quiet, ordinary problem half of humanity solved every month. Before pads. Before tampons. Before modern medicine turned it into a product category. Women were already managing it. And they had been doing it since before history even learned how to write them down.